seconds. Jerry Fineman, welcome, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Such an honor to have you with us. Am I doing your slides or do you have your slides?
You don't have any slides for me. You get me.
You don't have any slides?
No.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Our attendees will be so happy. So Jerry Fineman, Assistant DA in Riverside County, California, stepping in briefly with us after working all day in the office. Jerry, thanks for joining us to talk to us about the myths of strangulation.
All right. Well, thank you. So listen, we've had a lot today about the physiology of being strangled. And it would be great if every time I had a strangulation case, I could pick up the phone and call Bill Smock and say, get in your private plane and fly out here to Riverside. Or call Dr. Dugan and say, hey, great, come on down here to Riverside, or fly out to Hawaii and be with us. But you can't always do that. So very often we find ourselves in situations where we have to, either as prosecutors, convincing a fact finder, or as officers trying to convince prosecutors, or trying to convince the fact finder, the jury, or the judge, advocates working with survivors, trying to convince them, trying to explain what I call some of the 5 biggest myths around strangulation. And when I talk to people about how to do this, people will remember what they see. They'll often recall what they hear, but really what people remember most is an experience. So I try to come up with analogies that I have seen or I've experienced that I think I can share with them. So I'm going to share those with you. Feel free to make those your own or to put your own spin on them. And we will get going. So the first myth I think about strangulation is that strangulation and choking are the same thing. They are absolutely not the same thing. And you have that by now, because what we know is, even though our survivors might tell us they were choked, really what they mean is they were strangled. And everybody gets this wrong. I can't tell you the number of appellate opinions I have seen where they talk about the victim being choked. So how do you explain the difference? This is how I'm explaining the difference today. This is a Jolly Rancher candy. This is actually the Cinnamon Fire Jolly Rancher candy. They are delicious. Humans think they're delicious. My Jack Russell Terrier also thinks they are delicious. If this gets lodged inside the throat of my Jack Russell Terrier, you have choking. That is an internal obstruction of the airway. Strangulation is different. Strangulation is external pressure applied, which cuts off blood flow or airflow to and from the brain, or to or from the brain, because you can have arterial blood flow going up and cut off the venous blood flow and you're still being strangled. So we know that. So that's our first myth, is that strangulation and choking are different. So when I'm talking to a judge or I'm trying to give a lecture on something, I call it strangulation. And when I hear someone say choking, unless they're quoting the survivor, I will correct them. We even had a homicide staffing where my boss, the elected district attorney, corrected the homicide investigator, who kept saying, and then he choked her, and then he choked her again. And by the 3rd time he said it, my boss said, you know, I think you meant that he was strangled, meaning he applied external pressure to her neck area, which cut off the blood flow or airflow to or from her brain. And I thought, like, that was like an epiphany for me, because I realized, like, he gets it, he gets it. That's what you want to convey. Strangulation also, to a juror, conveys a much more serious incident than choking. We've all choked on something. We've all had that experience where we've choked on something, but not all of us have been strangled. That's the first myth. The second myth is that strangulation leaves visible injury. And here's my best way to explain why it doesn't. Take your non-dominant wrist, extend it into the air. Grab that wrist with your dominant hand and squeeze, cutting off the flow of blood to your fingertips. There are no brain cells in your fingertips. You won't be killing any brain cells. And as Dr. Smock told us, you can cut off the blood flow if you had a tourniquet around your thigh for a couple of hours and still be okay. Meanwhile, if you've really squeezed your wrist during this time, you're starting to feel numbness and tingling. You may also be feeling the blood pulsing into your hand from your wrist. That's what the attacker feels, that power, that control. You let go now, take a look at your wrist. Most of us will have no visible injury to our wrist because the pressure which is applied over a diffuse area. If you do have a little bit of redness to your wrist, let's wait a couple minutes, pick up the phone, call your local law enforcement agency, dial 911. We'll wait till they get here. We'll pretend that it's an exceptional day for law enforcement and they get here in about 3 minutes, which is a really good response time. In 3 minutes, look back at your wrist. I guarantee you will see absolutely nothing. So no visible injury. We know from the studies that less than half of the incidents have visible external injuries. That doesn't mean there's no injury. You just can't see it. Well, we should be able to see it. What's the best way to do it? Here's the best way to do it. We should just take the top off of everybody's brain and look inside. You can only do that in an autopsy. And if we have to do that in an autopsy, we probably failed in our mission to protect victims. So we don't want to do that. But it's also the reason why our victims need medical assessment, because without imaging, without a thorough medical assessment, you can't tell. Even the best doctor, even Dr. Smock and Dr. Dugan can't look at a victim externally and tell you whether they have internal brain damage if there's no visible external injury. You just can't do that. So look inside, whether that's through imaging, which is what we hope. What we hope we don't get to is the autopsy. So that is myth number 2, is that strangulation leaves visible injury. Myth number 3 is that if you're strangled, you can breathe. And here I'm going to bring in a friend. This is Christina. Christina is a mannequin head, which I use in training. Very interesting today. They're doing some hiring at my office, and we had a candidate that walked by my office, and she thought this was my toupee. So I just throw that out to you. Obviously a wild toupee if it's mine. But if you look at Christina, that's her name given to her right there. If you look at Christina and you look at her from the side, if you apply pressure to Christina's neck, the first thing you will come to are the blue straws. The blue straws are the veins. Veins start with the letter V. That is blood flow going back down from the brain, like a V is a downward pointing arrow. If you push harder, you will have the arteries compressed. Artery starts with the letter A. A is like an upward facing arrow, which is the oxygenated blood going up to the brain. You can grab Christina from the sides. You can grab Christina in a carotid restraint hold and still not compress Christina's airway. Strangulation victims can breathe up until the point that they die. Strangulation victims can scream and still be strangled up until the point that they die. So Christina comes in handy because it's a very good visual aid. And like a straw, right? It doesn't take a lot of force to compress that straw. Now, I don't get into a lot of the pressure because for the most part, we don't need to discern whether it was 8 pounds of pressure or 9 pounds of pressure. And certainly your survivor is not going to be able to tell you he used 22 pounds of pressure. But what you can say is it doesn't take a lot. It takes very little pressure in most circumstances to compress a vein or an artery. It takes certainly less than it does to shake someone's hand. So that's a great way to be able to explain why you don't have visible injuries and why a strangulation victim can breathe, because we're talking about blood flow. And a lot of the time, what we're seeing is it is blood flow which is compromised and not air. So the other thing I'll point out to you about that is people will say, well, how is that any different from like taking a deep breath when you go to swim underwater? Well, think about that for a second. You take that deep breath, and when you do that, the blood is still circulating. So the oxygenated blood circles up to the brain, deoxygenated blood back down, pump through the heart again, and you're still using up the oxygen while you're underwater until the point you need to breathe. And then people say, well, how do you explain petechia? Get yourself a balloon. And if you don't have a balloon, go down to your drugstore and buy a pack. Because what is petechia? It is a pressure-related injury, right? The blood, like air going into a balloon, the blood goes up into the brain but can't get out. We know what's going to happen if I keep blowing, right? It's going to pop. Everybody knows it's going to pop. If you really want the impression, you can actually let it go and pop. I wasn't going to scare anybody, so sorry about that. So that's why you don't see petechia. It is a pressure-related injury. It's not exclusive to being strangled. Remember that, which is why it's so important that we get a thorough medical history and that we get forensic documentation. So the fourth is that strangulation isn't dangerous because everybody does it, right? Well, I think George Floyd incident tragically pointed out that strangulation can be very dangerous. And there have been a number of mixed martial artists who have died as the result of being strangled, whether that was the exact result of having oxygen removed from their blood, or whether it was the result of a stroke from going through vascular neck restraint training. So strangulation is dangerous. That's why even in the UFC, if someone is strangled to the point of submission, there's a referee there in the ring with them and they get immediate medical attention. It's dangerous. We know it's dangerous. It's like being shot with a handgun. You don't have to get shot with a handgun to know it's dangerous. The basic symptom of first aid, airway, breathing, circulation, the ABCs of first aid. If you don't have airway, if you don't have breathing, if you don't have circulation, you die. Strangulation is interruption of either airway, breathing, circulation, or a combination thereof. So just because other people do it doesn't make it safe. And so all of your law enforcement friends that are out there practicing the carotid restraint hold are subjecting themselves to harm, potential fatal harm. They have to know that that is a risk of engaging in that behavior. Same with people practicing jujitsu or other types of martial arts. The fifth myth of strangulation is that your victim should be able to recall being strangled. Right? And we as prosecutors, as law enforcement officers, we want the story. Just give us the facts, ma'am. Give us what happened first, what happened next, and what happened third, right? Beginning, middle, end. Just take us through it. Walk us through it. Well, think about this. The hippo on campus, your hippocampus, is responsible for storing your memories. It is the digital tape recorder of your brain. So here is your digital tape recorder that we all carry around with us. It's our cell phone. And we have all had the experience where our cell phone runs out of battery power. Oxygenated blood flow is the battery power that charges the hippocampus. So that's the first reason being strangled, which interrupts the hippocampus' ability to store memory. It just can't do it. Even if you have air getting to the brain through the bloodstream, the hippocampus may still be impaired in its ability to record. Why is that? In this case, I tell people, think of the hippocampus as your filing cabinet. Now, some of us in our office, we have our files in this nice, neat, organized fashion. And as the memory comes in, when life is normal, we just drop the file in, and then we drop the next file in, and then we drop the next file in. That's the way we all do it. It's a nice, neat, organized file cabinet, which is the way we as prosecutors and law enforcement expect everybody to be able to recall everything that happened to them. However, the impact of trauma on the brain is different. When your brain is under trauma, all of a sudden different things happen. Now your brain is releasing chemicals that help you respond to the trauma. And as it releases those chemicals, and as your brain has to focus on whether or not you're going to survive or not survive, all of a sudden the act of finding the next file folder to put the next memory in chronological order becomes less important. Instead, it becomes like that filing cabinet that we all have in our office, which is our junk drawer. So it all gets thrown in there. It's there. If you have oxygen going to the brain, and the hippocampus has the ability to store memories, it may be going in there. It's just not going in there in an organized fashion. It's your junk drawer. So if your victim can recall parts of the incident, the best way to get them to recall it is not to get it in chronological order. Law enforcement, you know this because in officer-involved shootings, what do you get to do as law enforcement officers? You get a break between the traumatic incident and the time that you give your statement about what happened. And for those of you who aren't in law enforcement, that's not so they can make up what happened. The reason we have that break is because that allows the brain to resolve some of that trauma and for the hippocampus to kind of relax a little bit and to best get into those memories and try and figure out those memories. What we want to do is we want to be victim-centered in our approach. You often hear people talk about the FETI, or the Forensial Experiential Traumatic Interview. Access those memories through senses, sensory perception. I know you've been through something that was very traumatic, but what, if anything, do you recall about the incident? What, if anything, do you recall seeing? What, if anything, do you recall hearing or thinking or feeling? Those kinds of questions will get us the information. If someone's in a physically violent incident, we don't care much whether they hit with the left hand first or the right hand first. We care that they were hit. If someone is strangled, we don't necessarily care where it started. We care that the victim has something that we can use that will help us prove that strangulation to court. Trying to force them into giving us a chronological order will often create inconsistent statements, which will make us or the fact finder think that there is something amiss about the victim's credibility, and that does a disservice to them. So once again, the 5 big myths surrounding strangulation. 1, strangulation and choking are not the same. 2, you can be strangled and have no visible injury. In fact, you can be fatally strangled and have no visible injury. 3, you can be strangled and still breathe. 4, just because other people engage in activity where they strangle each other doesn't make it safe. And 5, your victim can't always recall what happened to them during a strangulation incident. Those are the top 5 myths of strangulation. I hope that that kind of takes everything that we've learned today and puts it in a sequence in which you can remember it and convey it in a convincing fashion to others. Thank you very much for having me.
Jerry Fineman, you are gold, my friend. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
We
Love
love
it.
And we love the fact that you gave everybody a little break from PowerPoint slides and just drove the point home across the board. I know you're busy with your work day, but we just want to say well done. The comments all coming in great, amazing. Yes, thank you to Christine for participating in your presentation. We love Jerry, and on it goes. So well done, my friend.
Thank you very much.